The rivers are starting to flood. I've been pretty curious to see what's going on, especially at the south end of the valley. This is when those rivers peak. Emma and I took a little drive to the south end of the valley to check things out. I've always been really curious about the rivers. In 2011, I was involved with some of the flooding that was happening throughout the valley, especially in Logan City. I work for Logan City, and I'm a swiftwater rescue technician. So I've always kept an eye on the rivers. This time of year, we're specifically looking at the Blacksmith Fork River and the Bear River, especially the Little Bear in the south end of the valley. This is the time that it actually peaks. So the first thing that I do when I look at the flows is I love to go to this KSL River Flow Tracker. I like it because it lists the biggest flooding rivers and areas first. And so you can kind of see what's going on. If you want to, if you're like, oh, where is this area? I don't really understand what I'm looking at here. Then you can click in and find more information. So for instance, the Little Bear River at Paradise. I know Paradise is at the south end of Cache Valley. The current flow is 88.8%, so it's within the banks, but the 5-day peak is going up to 101.9%. Now, if I want to see where they're talking about specifically, I can click on this little map button, and it takes me into Google Maps, and I can then zoom out and kind of see where I am. Oh, okay, I know here's Paradise, here's Highway 165, Hiram's north of here. These are kind of the areas that we're talking about. I like to take a look at that. The other thing that I like to do in here is if I want to see a specific area, like say for instance, I know Logan River really hasn't peaked yet. It usually comes 3 or 4 weeks after Blacksmith Fork. I like to come to the KSL River Tracker. I hit Control F. It brings up a little search bar up here, and then I can just put in Logan and quickly find the Logan River. So right now we're at 76% of flow, 5-day peak of 81.7. Like I said, this is still early on for Logan River. If anybody knows the difference why Blacksmith Fork peaks earlier than Logan, I'd be super interested to know that. So leave me some comments if you know that. Little Bear, I know Blacksmith Fork, those are the rivers that we know here. So let me Control F again. Let's put in Blacksmith Fork. I'll just put in Blacksmith. And then I can see Blacksmith Fork River near Hiram. That sounds good to me. Let's map it out here. And then it kind of shows me what we're talking about. I look for the left-hand fork, turn off. So anyway, there's Blacksmith Fork Canyon. You can kind of see what we're talking about there. Anyway, I'm super interested to know how the Blacksmith Fork is doing. Now, one of the things that really interested me is on Facebook, I was seeing guys posting about some of the flooding that was up Blacksmith Fork Canyon. I didn't know exactly where they were showing till we take the drive. And so I'll show you that and talk to you a little bit about that area as we go up towards Blacksmith Fork. But super interesting to see others people's videos. So I hope you enjoy mine, and I would love it if you would share yours with me as well. Okay, so let's go over to Gaia Maps. If you guys don't know Gaia Maps, you should. So you can see this blue track is the track that we followed, that we drove. We started here at Icon. This area always floods out of the bank pretty early, so it's a good indicator that we're above kind of the normal flow. Now, I said Logan River wasn't really flooding, but the confluence of Blacksmith Fork and Logan River comes in right here at Rendezvous Park. So this lower area does seem to flood pretty quick. It's been prepared pretty well. So even though it's out of the bank, it's kind of planned to allow it to flow out of the bank. If you guys are around in 2011, you may remember that Park Avenue flooded. It washed out some of the roadway. They actually closed it down for a while. That's all been repaired. There's been some culverts placed through there to allow water to go through there much better. This whole area down in here was cleaned up. In fact, the entire Logan River was cleaned up to avoid some of the debris that clogs things up. Bridges were raised, and then the flow of this whole river was improved. And what's fun is there's nice little sidewalks along this now that you can walk. So you can actually come down here and check that out. Underneath the bridge right here, it's been closed, so you can't cross underneath the bridge because of the rise in the river. So just be aware of that. And anyway, here's some footage of this area. You can see that it's out of its banks, but that's kind of to be expected. So after we left Icon, we kind of just traveled across 6th West here and over to 1700 South. This 1700 South area had a significant amount of flooding back in 2011, especially up into this area right here. This is the Country Manor area, is what we call it. It used to have some houses on the other side of this road here that flooded pretty significantly. They were actually purchased by the city and torn down. As a fire department, we trained in those houses a little bit, so we got some good exercises out of those houses. It was fun to go down to this Country Manor area and see the difference that's been made. The railroad tracks run right through here. They've got a huge berm that runs around the backside of this whole area to help protect it. They've just done a ton of work. So kudos to Logan City for the improvements that are made there. But this whole area, the Blacksmith Fork, has been greatly improved. The next area that we'd like to go to, I'm going to zoom out a little bit here so you can get some context, is down from Logan, traveling out towards Hiram, here in the Nibley Millville area. There are 3 bridges that I really look at. And this is just from previous flooding. So there's the bridge here by Ridgeline High School, kind of the north bridge. It's newer, it's high, it has no issues whatsoever. In fact, I didn't even film any of that. Down here on the south end, this is off of 200 South. This bridge is right by the Maverick, behind the Maverick. Been built up and improved since 2011. It looks great. And then you have this middle bridge right here that goes into Millville. Now this bridge hasn't been improved at all. In fact, I think this is kind of a problematic site if we're still looking for issues in the valley. This bridge is quite low. It's a pretty little area. It's really neat. But the debris tends to clog up in this bridge. And in 2011, they put a backhoe here and just sat and pulled debris out from underneath this bridge so it didn't clog up and eventually destroy the bridge. Just a fun fact, this year I've noticed that they've parked a backhoe there as well. So I guess they're planning on having to remove debris there. Now the areas surrounding this have had some bank improvements, and usually there was quite a bit of flooding out of the banks into some of these low-lying areas. And I just really wasn't seeing much of that like I have in years past. So I know Millville and Nibley did a ton of work cleaning those up, taking debris out of the river, cutting back trees that had fallen in, stuff like that. So kudos to those guys for their improvements. It's looking pretty good through there. We drove south into Hiram, and this is where we went up Blacksmith Fork Canyon to check things out up there. I didn't go down Hollow Road. The river does run kind of along there, but a lot of that's private property, and I didn't want to be the weirdo driving down people's driveways and stuff, so I didn't get into that area. I just started in Blacksmith Fork Canyon. It's actually pretty steep and deep in that area, so the river tends to stay in its banks pretty well. As you travel up the canyon more and you get more towards this left-hand fork area, this is where you start to see the river out of its banks. So just below left-hand fork, where you have a little bit flatter, wider areas, you're seeing a lot of water outside of the bank. I was seeing it in the Pioneer Campground area and a little bit after the Pioneer Campground area. You can see where we kind of made some loop-de-loops is because we spent some time here filming, and this is the Hiram Park that's up the canyon there, and it is well underwater, as you can see. From there on, there's pretty much the river's out of its banks all the way up the canyon. I don't know that there's really significant flooding into some of the cabins. They do have sandbags around a lot of those cabins to help protect them, but I wasn't seeing a ton of flooding at the cabins. However, some of the campsites where people park their RVs are definitely underwater, but I also think people plan on those areas being underwater. We turned around up at Amflat Road, headed back down, and this Rock Canyon area is where you were seeing all the Facebook posts with the flooding. We noticed that the shoulder of the road had been pretty washed out, but there was no flooding really going on as we passed through it, and they had cleaned up the road really well. As we exited Blacksmith Fork, we actually traveled south down 165 right here into Paradise, and then traveled west. That way we could get an eye on the little bears that crossed the road. It seemed to be well within its banks and not particularly high or traveling super fast. I know it's showing that it's pretty full though, and there's some watches for the next few days. So we continue to travel out west, and man, this is just beautiful area. It's turning off really green at the south end of the valley. It was just super gorgeous. So then we made our way up to the Hiram Reservoir. We wanted to check out the south end of the reservoir and kind of see what the water levels were there. We do some boating on Hiram Reservoir, so this is always significant to us. Anyway, we really like watching the rivers and seeing their different levels, see what's going on throughout the valley. Again, this was just the south end because these are the rivers that are tending to peak this time of year. I'm really interested to also watch Logan River, so I may do some videos on the Logan River. If there are areas that you are interested to watch, or if there are problem areas that you want to share, I would love your comments to see what's going on in your area. If you wouldn't mind sending me your videos, making comments, I would love to hear what you have to say.